What's up, you guys? We're back again with another video, and today I'll be covering my 8.3 PvP range DPS tier list. In my previous video, you guys saw me cover melee DPS and why I think those specs are currently viable or are not currently viable in PvP, and prior to that, we covered the healing specs, and again, today, we're covering the range specs, as a lot of you have been asking me in the comment section to cover that. Now, just like in my last video, I'll be covering which spec you should pick up, which spec you should avoid if you're new to the game, which spec you should explore. All of that good stuff we'll cover in today's video, and I'll be using the same tier maker format as it seems like you guys really like that. Now, quick little pitch. My birthday is going to be, well, my birthday is this Friday, and I'm turning, well, I don't want to talk about how old I'm turning because I'm still uncomfortable about that, even though I'm pretty young. I just don't like getting any older. This Friday, depending on the day that you're watching this video, I'll be doing a 24-hour stream somewhere here on my screen. You can follow my Twitch page. I'll be streaming for 24 hours. I'll be having some drinks. I'll be doing viewer arena games, keys, dungeons, whatever you guys want to do. I'll be hanging out with you guys because I'm a loser and I have no friends, and this is what all I do. And with all that being said, let's hop right into the video. So, just like my previous video, we'll be using the same tier maker format. I'll be covering each tier and why I believe each spec belongs in such tier. Starting out with the worst range spec, personally for me, and I think a lot of people would agree. Sorry to do this. I always hate doing this because people get upset when I do this because they really like this spec or they really like these classes, but it has to go somewhere, guys. The Marksman Hunter and the BM Hunter. I'm going to be placing the Marksman Hunter and the BM Hunter in the D tier because there's a wide variant between some of the top range specs and the BM and Marksman Hunter. Marksman Hunter, I wouldn't even mess with it. BM, you can have some success in 2v2s and you can kind of have some success in 3v3 guys, but Survival Hunter is just a better hunter spec currently in the game. They do provide decent bursts, but they're just so squishy, and Survival does everything that the, ranged variants do, but just better. More reliable on landing traps, more consistent damage. I think BM is somewhat okay, but I would just completely stay away from Marksman. You have like no comp options available to you. You can play like Holy Paladin BM in 2s or Wrestler Druid BM in 2s, but it's nowhere near as good as some of the other options. And if you do pick up the spec, you're gonna have a really hard time pick up either spec. You're gonna have a really hard time finding queues. So that's why I can't recommend the class to anybody that wants to pick one up. If you really want to play one, do it at your own discretion. Now, moving forward, we're gonna hop right into a spec that I think is actually still very good, and that's gonna be the Elemental Shaman. The Elemental Shaman right now is pretty underplayed. I think it does have some crazy burst, right? Some very powerful burst, and it does have a lot of utility. It has a shear, a range kick on a short CD. It has purge, grounding totem. It's very good at being disruptive. It has a lot of, support utility with off heals and hex, and I think it's a pretty underplayed spec that does have some significant damage behind it, and you can also do well in 2v2s as an Elemental Shaman. However, you're not going to find as many Qs if you were to pick up another range DPS. Elemental Shamans still have a stigma around them that they're not as good as some of the other range specs, and they're not, but I think if you pick one up, you'll enjoy it, you'll have some success, but you're gonna have a harder time finding Qs, which is why I'm currently placing it in the B tier. And on top of that, there aren't that many viable comp options for the Elemental Shaman, but there are some, so pick it again at your own discretion. Now, a spec that can be paired with the Elemental Shaman and that does have 3 range specs with only one of them really being viable, and it's probably one of the best and most powerful range specs in the entire game, and has been almost all expansion except the beginning of season 1 and almost all of Legion, especially towards the end. That is the Destruction Warlock. I'm not covering Affliction Warlock, guys. I'm not covering Demo Warlock. Again, I'm making this video for people that are looking for competitive PvP advice, specs that are actually seen prominent, powerful specs. The Destruction Warlock is miles ahead better than almost all the range DPS, but on top of that, it's just way better than the other variants, that being Affliction or Demo. The Destruction Warlock has been broken for so long. It deals absurd damage, absolutely one-shot absurd damage. It's extremely tanky. It has so much self-sustain due to its mastery, and it just has probably one of the most annoying, I personally can't stand this class. I think a lot of people that fight against them just can't stand playing against Destruction Warlocks because they have so much micro CC with the root, the death coil, the infernal stuns, fear, and then you kick the fear straight into a chaos bolt, or you want to get dispelled on the fear and you don't, then you eat a chaos bolt. The Destruction Warlock is probably also one of the most frustrating classes to play as, because everyone just runs from you anytime you activate a major cooldown. And it's more prominent on the Destruction Warlock than the other specs, because during those openings, during those opportunities of Dark Soul, or during your Infernals, and you build up those stacks to buff your Chaos Bolt, everyone knows that you can get one shot during that time, so they're just going to run behind a pillar, and then outside of that, you're just getting trained down the entire time. So it's good to play a comp where you're able to get some breathing room. If you play with an SP, a Shadow Priest, sometimes they're forced to go the Shadow Priest, or they might go you, but then the Shadow Priest can create some good CC opportunities, and you can one-shot during those. If you play with a Rogue, he can land a kidney shot, a bomb, create openings for you to land those Chaos Bolts. If you play a double caster comp like Fire Mage, Destruction Warlock, then obviously they might go the Fire Mage because they have to stop Greater Pyroblast, and then you're free to cast. So you have to find a comp that allows you to actually play your class without getting shut down, but it's by far one of the strongest ranged DPS specs in the entire game, and it does very well in 2v2s as well as 3v3. So Destro Warlocks, broken. Do I recommend you pick one up? Yeah, I do. I think they're very powerful. It's frustrating to play, but it's really satisfying to one-shot somebody, and everyone's gonna want you on their team because you're just a really broken class. And I think they're gonna stay that way as they have been for the past year. Now, moving on to a spec that was so powerful, similar to the Destruction Warlock in Season 1 of Battle for Azeroth, and has now just been kind of lackluster as of recent, hasn't seen many changes, got some nerfs at the beginning of the expansion, and don't see a lot of play, and that is the Moonkin or Balanced Druid or Boomkin Druid. I'm going to be placing this spec in the C tier, and the reason why that is I believe that the Elemental Shaman is a better spec than the Balanced Druid. Balanced Druids used to have crazy star surges at the beginning of the expansion, and there's a famous clip of Sam one-shotting people during BlizzCon. I think he one-shot Peekaboo or two-shot Peekaboo, 1-star surge, 2-star surge on Peekaboo, and killed them in 2 single globals. You still do a lot of damage, however you have to spend most of the game in bear form, otherwise you're just going to fall over, and the damage that you provide is just padded dot damage, and then you come out for star surges. And the reason why I'm placing this spec in the C tier over the B tier like the Elemental Shaman is I believe that the Elemental Shaman will do better in 2v2s, and I think you're going to have an easier time finding comp options as the Elemental Shaman. The Elemental Shaman can be paired with a Warlock, it can be paired with a Shadow Priest, it can be paired with a Rogue, it can be paired with a few other classes, but again, even that spec doesn't have a lot of comp options available to them. But with that being said, the Balanced Druid actually has less comp options available to them, you guys. It is not as prominent of a spec, and that's why I'm placing it in the C tier. Not really seen in 2v2s, has very few comp options in 3v3s. For example, a Shadow Priest used to be paired with Balanced Druids. However, you'll see a lot more Shadow Priests playing with Destruction Warlocks because they're simply just better, and the comp is a much more difficult comp to take down. So in my opinion, the Balanced Druid is definitely better than Hunters, not as good as Elemental Shamans, so in my opinion, it belongs in the C tier. Alright, now moving on to a spec which has seen some PvE nerfs, which does somewhat leak into PvP, but I do believe this spec is still very strong, and it has a lot of CC. It is a great supportive utility class, and it can really do an excellent job of rotting down the entire team, and it does have a lot more comp options available to them when compared to the Elemental Shaman or the Balanced Druid, and that is going to be the Shadow Priest, and we're placing it in the A tier. Despite the nerfs, Shadow Priests always scale very well with gear, and so do Discipline Priests as well. Dot classes scale very well with gear, and I expect the Shadow Priest to grow stronger as the season goes on. Obviously, other opponents will be doing more damage as well, but I expect with the scaling, Shadow Priest to do exceptionally well, and even right now, it's doing very well. RPS or Rogue, Shadow Priest Paladin are very powerful comps. Shadow Priest Warlock is also a very powerful comp, and you can also see Shadow Priest paired with things like Windwalker Monks and Hunters from time to time, and they're decent in 2v2s. They're not the best range spec, but they're okay. They're very good at stalling out the game. They're very good at offering supportive utility with things like Mass Dispel, Life Grip, and they can spam Purge, which used to be very good in the Resto Druids, but you're not seeing as many Resto Druids as you've seen in the past. Still though, I think the Shadow Priest is an excellent option, a decent class to start off on. I think it's not too complex. I do think it requires a little bit of awareness. I do think it requires general game knowledge to really fulfill that supportive role. and I do think it needs a lot of gear to do damage. However, I expect this class to stay around for a while, and I can recommend personally the Shadow Priest, as I think it's a good beginner caster for you to get used to playing as a ranged DPS. Okay, now to end the video with one of the most prominent casters in the game, one of the most prominent ranged DPS in the game, and this spec is even absolutely insane in PvE as well. It is the Mage. You know where the Mage belongs. The Mage belongs in the S tier. It's been there for as long as I can remember. It's involved in one of the best comps in the entire game, and that is Rogue Mage X, Rogue Mage Druid, Rogue Mage Priest, Rogue Mage Pally. Primarily, you'll be seeing specs like Fire and sometimes Frost, and rarely Arcane. Frost and Fire are both extremely strong specs. You'll see Frost a lot in tournament play, and you'll see Fire a lot on the ladder or in your active live gameplay when you just play and queue for Arena. Fire has incredible burst, while Frost has a lot more control in terms of slows. However, Fire has easier forms of CC like Dragon's Breath, DB, into a ring. If you don't get the ring, you can go for a sheep. If you get kicked on sheep, you can cast Greater Pyro Blast, or you can just cast fireballs so you can get your combust up, sooner. So Fire is primarily the spec you'll see the most, and it's involved in also comps like MLD, so Mage Lock Druid. You'll see Destruction Warlock Fire Mage Druid. You'll also see Frost Mage Destruction Warlock Resto Druid. Extremely strong spec. I don't expect it to see any changes. Even if it does get nerfed a little bit, Rogue Mage X will always be a really good comp just based on the amount of CC that it has and how it can execute burst in small little windows and end the game in one go. A little bit more difficult of a spec if you're new and returning to the game. If you've always played a ranged DPS and you're pretty comfortable on knowing how to kite and things like that, when compared to the Shadow Priest where you really can't kite and you have to just stand there and take all of the damage and just know how to mitigate that, then pick up the Mage. However, if you're not used to that kind of stuff, I would avoid the Mage for now and then pick it up later on down the road. You'll just have a harder road to climbing arena rating because you're not going to be very good, and people are going to notice that rather quickly, where it's kind of harder to notice that on some of the other specs because you are responsible for landing sheeps, you are responsible for landing the CC and getting setups going along with the rogue that you're playing with. But MLD, Mage, Lock, Druid, I think early on you'll find a lot of success because you can just cast Greater Pyro Blast, he casts Chaos Bolts, they have to stop one of them, and then eventually they just lose the game. So those are my recommendations, you guys. This is my tier list for 8.3. This could change down the road. If you have any questions, you can let me know in the comment section below. If you guys enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you guys love this video, consider subscribing. Again, you can find my stream somewhere here on the screen, and you can check me out there. And if you're looking for your own individual, personalized coaching, my Patreon page is somewhere here on the screen. You can head over there, support me on Patreon, at the same time earn yourself some coaching. But with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.